Hello, everybody, and we're back. We're going to pretend like we didn't just take an extended break and just disappear for a little bit, and we're just going to dive straight back into it and just dive right back into the football experience brought to you by On the Pod. I'm Caleb. He's Nev. Nev, how you going?
Pretty good, pretty good. And yourself?
Yeah, good, man. Just sort of like been away from football for a bit, but the last probably week or so just started gearing back up for the new season, which is like a week and a half away in most cases. So I think it's about time that we started getting a little bit more excited for football being back. I don't know if you share those sentiments or what you've been doing in the time off.
Well, I sort of like you. Like I just took a break away from football. Like there was nothing really to watch or talk about. Like there was some transfers, but like what you said, like over the past like week and a half since the friendlies have started, you can sort of feel that football is back, and it's a good thing. I'm excited, especially for my team.
It is good. All right, so I was going to throw it out to you and let you lead off on what you thought was the most eye-catching thing that's happened in the off-season. But I'm guessing that you're going to lead off with your heart after that statement, and you're going to lead off with what you've seen from Arsenal. Am I correct in saying that?
Uh, I can't really
Or have you
isolate.
got something else?
No, I can't really isolate one particular transfer or even like one particular result because you like with the results you can't really look into it too much because it is preseason.
Mm.
Like there's obviously some narratives like the narrative around United where they can't seem to sign any players. But they did sign is it Martinez from Ajax like this past week, so that's been confirmed. But for like the last like 3 or 4 weeks before that, like no one wanted to go to United, and I think no one still really wants to go to United. So that's one narrative going around. The other narrative is obviously how are Barcelona signing players when when they have like a 1.2 billion dollar debt. But they seem to be, taking, they brought in Lewandowski, they brought in Rafinha. Did they bring in someone else? Like I swear they brought in someone else, but the name is just eluding me at the moment.
Well, they brought in Kessie on a free, Christensen on a free as well, but obviously on a free means huge wages.
Yeah,
And they're currently not paying Frankie de Jong what he's owed. So that story, yeah, that one's eye catching for sure.
yeah. But other than that, they obviously have the probably the biggest transfer of the, in my eyes, the biggest transfer of the window would be Haaland to City. I guess it was sort of confirmed before the season ended, or at least like it was 99% confirmed. Like it was all but confirmed except for like the actual signature before the season ended. The other big one is obviously Nunez to Liverpool, who's meant to, I guess, in a way, sort of rival the Haaland to City transfer. But then you guys like, and both Liverpool and City both had like their outgoings. So Sterling's left, Jesus is left, Zinchenko's left, and then for you guys, what Mane's left, and I think he's the only really major one that's left for you guys. I think you guys also sold Nico Williams, but he's a youngster who's sort of
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
fringes.
just
So
Mane really.
yeah, like so City have, I don't know. Would you really say they have weakened because they've signed Calvin Phillips
No.
and also that's is it Alvarez from Argentina?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
from River, I believe. And they're still in the works. Lots of talk about Cucurella as well, or Cucurella, which would be a good left back signing after Zinchenko going. Um, I don't know. So within that, you've just listed off a few. Um, I guess City and Liverpool haven't really been that interesting with what they've done, and it was interesting that you said about how they compare and how they've pretty much done nearly the same things, haven't they? Really, and Liverpool getting rid of one of the front three and bringing in a striker type, and City doing exactly the same. So I wasn't really obviously Haaland. We knew about it, like you said, for a while. So in terms of eye catching in the off season, it didn't really fit that criteria. Lewandowski, we had an inkling, but that's another massive transfer. The Delit one from Juve to Bayern, I thought that was quite eye catching for me because we didn't really hear too much about it beforehand, and then it just sort of happened. And obviously, back in his Ajax days, we were touting him as the next great centre back, really. And he's still so young that he could fulfil that, but he had a rough time at Juve, so his move back to Bayern, I think, caught my eye. But I guess I reckon we start with the one that you're talking about, with the odd, peculiar case of Barcelona. Um, from the outside looking in, what do you think they're doing? What do you think is the plan with the signings they've made in the summer?
I actually have no idea because at first, when Xavi came in, I thought that they were going to, I guess, take a different approach, at least financially, by starting to bring in more players from the Barcelona B team, sort of like Pep 2.0, like that sort of structure. But it almost seems like they continued with the old regime of bringing in like these sort of marquee names. Whether they'll make an impact or not, I guess we'll see this season. Like whether Rafinha and Lewandowski are gonna be those ones to actually make an impact, or are they just gonna turn out like Dembele before Xavi came in, like Griezmann as well, Coutinho, because it just seems like the same sort of stuff that they've been doing over the past like 3 or 4 seasons that led them into this predicament.
It's interesting. It definitely is interesting, but I don't know. I don't get the same vibe. I think they've actually signed good players, but I have no idea why they've done it. And it's either I think if you took this window, this market in the summer that we've just had or are still having, if you took that in isolation, then you would look at it and think, all right, that's a clear plan. They're revamping the attack. They've signed a world class striker in Robert Lewandowski, who's, let's not forget, uh, scored 50 goals last season for Bayern in the Bundesliga, which is a 34 game league, which is just staggering. So that signing alone, I would be getting excited as if I was a Barcelona fan. The amount of money they spent on Rafinha was quite not quite staggering, but very close to staggering. To spend, I think it was 65 million euros on a player who I think is good, and he looked really good in the preseason friendly or the bit that I watched against Real Madrid. But to spend that much when you've re-signed Usman Dembele in the summer instead of just at least just letting him go at the very least, and then when you had a window beforehand where you signed Ferran Torres and you signed Adama Traore and you signed Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, I mean, that makes no sense to me. You went out in the last window, Xavi's first window, and you got a whole new front three, and then you've pretty much done exactly the same again this window. It's just I don't understand what the plan is, but I think the players that they've signed are actually pretty exciting. Frank Kessie in the midfield, I really like. I've never been a big Christensen fan, so we'll see if he can turn around. But who I am a big fan of, and sort of a little bit of pushback against your point about maybe you didn't say not bringing players from the B team, but it's interesting because they're buying all these players, but at the same time they do in in a starting 11, you'd think that they would have at least three Barcelona B team players come through, whether it be Pedri and Gavi playing together in midfield, whether it be with Arojo at the back, who I think has to be a mainstay. He's the one. I love Arojo at the back. He looks fantastic at either right back or centre back. He looks to be a really promising young defender. So if he can be a mainstay, and then you've got him, or you've got Ansu Fati in the front line, or so they are still bringing players through, but then they're like contradicting themselves, and they're just going out. It's like, yeah, let's get these players. I guess the reason that I feel a little bit different is because Rafinha's still a player on the up, and Lewandowski is a true world class striker. I know he's a bit older, but we know the stories about how he maintains himself. So that's just the reason why I feel a little bit different. I know Coutinho was on the up, but I don't think Coutinho ever hit world class. I think Griezmann, not to a Lewandowski level, although he was fantastic around the time that they signed him. And honestly, I thought both those signings would work out. Coutinho looked like a heir apparent to Iniesta, but the thing is as well, they've spent a lot less money on these signings. I know they've still spent a fair bit, and we know what we've heard about their situation, which, look, I don't really go into. I don't. My understanding is, and it might be ill-advised understanding, is that pretty much all of these big clubs run at a loss. So it must have gotten pretty bad for the Barcelona one to become so public and for so many people to know at what kind of losses they run at. But I don't know. I've always thought that they all pretty much run at a loss and they're all indebted to the bank, and that's how they're funding these ridiculous transfers. But the figures are a lot less. So I don't quite feel to that level. But it's just interesting how they've contradicted their last transfer window with this one, because now you can't see an Aubameyang and a Traore playing in the foreseeable future.
Well, Traore's gone back to Wolves, hasn't he?
Oh, was he alone?
Yeah, he was alone.
There you go.
Yeah, but in terms of like how they're doing it, from my understanding, is La Liga changed their I guess their version of financial fair play, where you could I think like the team's player wages or the spending, it can only be like a certain percentage of your revenue, and Barca were making too big of a loss or something like that, so that's why they couldn't re-sign Messi, for instance. But then, like, obviously, you know, the accountants that they've brought in have managed to play with the books to make it look a little bit more attractive than what it was before. So that's probably why they're able to bring in all these players. Plus, I think the Spotify deal is like 600 mil over 3 years, if I'm not mistaken.
It's that, and I think they got a new TV rights deal with an American company, which was worth a lot.
And I think they refinanced a bunch of their loans as well. So yeah, basically smart accounting has led them to this. But like what you've said, where they brought in a front three during the winter window 6 months ago, and now they brought in pretty much another front three during this window. So what do you do with Aubameyang then? What do you do with Dembele? It's a weird one. And then Ansu Fati, like I think last season he missed the entire season because of was it an ACL or something, or it was a really serious. It was a really serious injury. So like, and even before that, like he had a couple of like half serious or niggling injuries, and like that's pretty concerning as like for an 18, 19-year-old to already be getting those types of injuries. So hopefully, you know, he can stay injury free this season, and this can be his first full season. But like, yeah, if he's coming in and he's fully fit, then where do you fit him in then? It just seems like there's too many players and very little spots. And yeah, sure, they're competing on like three fronts in terms of the league, Champions League, and their domestic cup. But even then, you know, I'm not sure how Xavi's gonna get it all to tick, basically.
Well, that leads me to I was going to ask you while you were talking about that. I wanted to ask, what do you think the more realistic sort of season looks like for Barcelona this season? Do you think they're winning the league and going deep in the Champions League, or do you think they're battling to get into the top four and a round of 16 exit in the Champions League? How do you see it panning out after this summer when you take into account that factor, the too many guys theory, that have too many quality players? I mean, but you also alluded to the fact that they're fighting on three fronts. So if it can gel together and they can have that many good players in the squad, I mean, can they go deep in the Champions League? Can they win the league? Which way do you see it more likely to go?
It's probably going to be a closer two horse race than what it was last season between Real and Barca. I can't really see Barca winning the league, but I can see them closing that gap because I think it was like what a 12 or 15 point gap between them and Real. So I can see them closing it and it being a little bit of a bigger race or better race. So maybe like a 6 point gap or something.
Can you not see them winning it?
No, no.
Ooh,
I, I,
that's very
I,
interesting. All
I
right, I
just
think
I can't see them being too consistent enough with all the new players that they've brought in.
okay. So I think this is the perfect time.
And just with
Um,
the Champions League, I can see them round of 16 quarterfinals. I can't see them making the semis.
it'll be interesting to see. I think if things go right, I can see them making the semis and being a contender to win it because they've got such a deep squad. They've got so many good players in so many positions now. Especially if they get Kunde from Sevilla. If they get him at centre back as well, they're just going
I
to be
thought Chelsea
stacked
won him.
everywhere.
I thought
Yeah, and the reports, the latest, and I never like go with anything until it's done because this stuff changes so quickly. But the latest was that he was favouring Barcelona. That was what I was reading earlier today. So, but again, that could flip. He could change his mind. He could be at Chelsea, but it looks like it's those two really. But if they get him as well, he was in my third team for the teams of the year. So I just think they'll be stacked around the park. And if things go right and if they can gel, um, then they can go deep in the Champions League and they can definitely win La Liga. But I guess with that being said, we now need to contrast them to pretty much the only other viable threat we see to La Liga. I think we agree on that in Real Madrid. Um, and you speak about that consistency, but Real Madrid are going to be changing this season a lot. I don't think Cruz, Modric, and Casemiro can last a whole season in La Liga playing. I don't know. I think they'll be limited maybe to around 25 games, not including Champions League. I think that's in Ancelotti's mind. That's probably the way he'd want to draw it up, given that they're all getting on a little bit. Casemiro is the youngest of them, but obviously they have a whole nother midfield right behind it waiting to play, and it played in that game against Barcelona in the friendly in Valverde, Chouameni, and Camavinga, and I think that looks like a really solid combination between those three, and they're all so young. But being so young, can you guarantee that consistency? Because I think a lot of that, maybe Casemiro comes in for sure, many a lot of games, but they've spent a lot on that midfield as well. So I think they'll want him to start playing and probably start playing this season. And now the interesting thing is that I guess we've got a bigger picture question to ask in amongst all of this. But now we've got Benzema, who for me is wearing the crown, the best player in the world, going into next season. He's on one side. And then for me, you've got the two strikers who made my first team in Benzema and Lewandowski at Barcelona. So we've got that whole other dimension. And I guess the bigger picture question, maybe before or after you touch on Real Madrid, is um, are we more excited by the Barcelona Real Madrid rivalry than we are by the Liverpool City rivalry this season?
I'm not really, to be honest. just because I think Barcelona is still going through that rebuild. Maybe, and they just brought in so many new players, so it just depends when they will tick or if they will be able to tick or gel together. And like you said, Real Madrid has like they already last season you started to see that they're starting to rebuild for the future and starting to I guess rebuild that midfield three to replace Cruz, Modric, and Casemiro. So they have that consistency and they have that chemistry together. And like, yeah, sure, you have the Benzema Lewandowski narrative, but it's no disrespect to both of them, but it's a poor man's Ronaldo Messi rivalry from the years gone by.
Like it's maybe 90 cents on the dollar, but that's pretty good because those two were unreal.
Yeah,
So
but like that's
to
where
be 90 cents of that dollar is pretty
yeah.
good.
Look, that's when they were scoring like they were each scoring like 60 goals a season plus.
Well, Lewandowski's been 40 plus for however many, and he hit 50 last season, so he's doing those numbers.
Yeah,
And
he's getting
and
close.
Benzema, we talked about Benzema's exploits, especially the knockout stages of the Champions League. So I don't know. As far as a poor man's, it's
Yeah,
really close. It might be
it's
98 cents on the dollar.
it's not like it's not like pocket change. It's like can you buy
Okay,
can
all
you
right.
buy the large coffee or can you buy the medium coffee? So
The old
there's that.
venti.
But you know what? I do want to add in also the one thing that we've overlooked is how much will the World Cup play with this, because I think Real Madrid are going to have a lot more players going to the World Cup than Barcelona, because Barcelona, what they have, does Rafinha make the Brazil squad? Maybe now that he's in Barcelona. So yeah, they have a couple of Spanish players in. Gavi will probably make the squad. Pedro will definitely make the squad. But Lewandowski isn't going to the World Cup, is he? Poland didn't make it, did they? From memory.
I thought they did.
I can't
I
remember
have to
now.
fact check that one.
World Cup qualified teams. Let's have a quick look at that one, because I don't want
While you're looking it up, there was probably like two questions in there.
to.
And the first one is the striker point. Are we more excited for Haaland Nunez, or are we more excited for Benzema Lewandowski? Me personally is Benzema Lewandowski. And the second point was, I think we see it the same way. We just see it from a different perspective in terms of, for me, and I'm not quite saying that I think I'm more excited for this, because obviously I'm a Liverpool fan as well. So obviously I'm very excited for Liverpool City. But the fact that Barcelona and to a certain extent Real Madrid are new teams, they have like these new pieces that need to fit in, whereas City and Liverpool have really just put a striker into what they already have, which it will be interesting to see in itself. But if it clicks right for both these teams, I think we could have something special. But for me, it's like it's interesting to see the way that this is going to blend, because now I think Real Madrid and Barcelona, they've closed the talent gap at least. Now, City and Liverpool are teams that have talent, and they've been doing this for years now. So that's what puts them to the next level. But now I think Real Madrid and Barcelona have nearly, if not as good a talent as those two. So we've got the potential for a rivalry like that. And then when you throw in the fact that historically it's a better rivalry anyway, because it's Barcelona versus Real Madrid, the multi-dimensional nature of that rivalry could be really exciting. And you've got the club legend in Xavi one side, and then you got Ancelotti, the Godfather. I just think there's a lot of interesting storylines with that, and the fact that it's new could be fun. Could make it more interesting to watch than, and I'm sure we'll touch on them soon, but the City Liverpool rivalry coming up.
Yeah, look, it all depends on how close they are in the league, because last season there was just too big of a gap. And then, and yeah, like you had the shock 4-0 result for the second Classico, but like Real Madrid had, by that point, had pretty much already wrapped up the league,
Yeah.
and Barcelona did make that run, and that inexperience towards the final like 4 or 5 games. Is because I remember we were questioning, could Barcelona close the gap so that it could mathematically come down to the final 2 or 3 games, but they, like an inexperienced team, they dropped the ball, like in that fifth or sixth last game of the season in the league. So like
Well,
it was already wrapped up by
I
then.
think, yeah, more importantly, Real Madrid didn't drop the ball. I think
Yeah,
because they'd already built such a lead, yeah.
but also because
That would, but yeah,
they
just
have the experience as well. Because like what you had a pretty like you had a very young midfield that Barca were relying on, and I guess in terms of like team chemistry, like they still hadn't created those bonds so that when they do face adversity, they can, I guess, sort of count on one another to get to lift the team and get them out of that predicament. So yeah, like it depends on how close the table is going to be when they do play in that first Clasico, and especially the second Clasico. Also, Poland did qualify, so
yeah,
you know what? They might actually have a very equal amount of players going to the
yeah.
World
I
Cup.
feel they will.
Yeah.
This is, and I feel that goes into the point about them closing the talent gap in terms of there's international stars on all of these teams now, and I think the biggest challenge to that Liverpool, Man City, who for me were clearly 1 and 2. I know Real Madrid made a late push. You could put them number one. That's fine. I'd go with that as well. But I just think for me, Liverpool and City were 1 and 2. But now I think we were talking about Barcelona pushing their way into the top 8. And it remains to be seen. That's what we've got to remember. I can't get too high on this, but I just think if Xavi is as good as, I don't know, the early promise has shown, if he can get the right tactical system for that much talent, but then as well manage the dressing room for that much talent. I think they'll need to get rid of 1 or 2 before the season starts. But if he can do it, he's got a lot to work with, and that could be very exciting. So,
I think he might have too much to work with because there's too many good players there, and just not enough spots. So like, how is he going to keep all of them happy? That's my only concern. And like, I just want to make a reference as well. Do you remember like the sort of like those mid 2000s FIFA games? Like I think like FIFA '05, '06, '07. I Do you remember how you obviously had the star ratings of teams? So you had like attack, midfield, defense, and like that was rated it was rated up to 100 pretty much, but you'd never get 100. But then the other thing that would show up was chemistry. And I remember Real Madrid always had like 30 or 33, and like Barca had like high 80s, or I think now it's like flipped. So like Barca now, because they brought in so many new players over the past 6 months. So like, don't just take this transfer window, take the last one as well. So over the past 6 months, they've brought in so many players. Their chemistry at the moment is like, probably what, in the 30s and stuff. Whereas Real Madrid's like really high because that team's been together for quite a while.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. That's a good way of looking at it. They flipped it because traditionally, growing up, you'd never go Barcelona. This is never Barcelona's approach.
Yeah.
They're always bringing players through, and it's always Real Madrid's approach. But that's a good point. I like that. I guess there was one other little thing about Real Madrid two other little things. Rudiger, not such a little thing because he's a man mountain at the back there. But he came in and I don't know if you saw any of the friendly, but in the friendly, Ancelotti was playing him as an out and out left back, and Alaba was retaining his position at the centre back. I just found that really fascinating, and it sort of crept into a lot of the friendly games that I saw, teams playing centre backs or players who traditionally are centre backs as right backs. You saw it in the Arsenal game with Ben White almost making it a 3 more in that game, and I'm sure we'll touch on it later. But in the same game as well, in the Real Madrid-Barcelona game, you saw Araujo at right back as well, and he's traditionally a centre back. So that's just a little development that I'm fascinated to see what the what managers are thinking with that one. I know a lot of the time it's to make probably a back three like Arsenal did, but in the Real Madrid and Barcelona cases, those two players were playing as out and out right and left back. So that was something fascinating to see. It'll be interesting to see how Rudiger fits into this now because obviously he's another good defender, but that Real Madrid defense was a little bit all over the place at times. They're really good defenders, all three of them now, so that you can get away with it. And Courtois is such a good goalkeeper behind. But in terms of and Casemiro in front as well. But in terms of organisation, they've got another sort of defender who wants to go in and be aggressive in those half spaces just in front of him. So that will be another interesting thing because I think all three of them are very much like that. So that'll be interesting to see. And then the other thing is, and it's an afterthought, and I guess 5 years ago, to think that Eden Hazard would just be a nobody would just be ridiculous, I think, because he was one of the best players in the world at that Chelsea spell. And to think Real Madrid are going to pay 100 million and get absolutely nothing out of him is crazy. And if there was ever a time for him to step up, it would have to be now because Real Madrid didn't go out and get Mbappe. They didn't get Salah. They didn't get Mane. So that right-hand side was somewhat open, but from what I've seen, what I saw in the friendly, what you've seen late last season as well, it looks like Rodrigo is stamping his name all over that spot. And it looks like Hazard will probably follow the likes of, and this was an interesting one, Lorenzo Insigne. I thought he had a lot more football in him in Europe, but he's off to Toronto. So I wouldn't be surprised if Hazard is the next one to go, maybe even halfway through the season. But I just thought that was a crazy thought. I don't know if you have anything to say on that one.
Nah, the boy he has the same problem as me. He just loves his food too much. I heard something like that, that like he during the off season, like he absolutely digs in, like ice cream, burgers, all that crap.
Are you sure? Are you sure it's just the off season at this point? I reckon it's all year round
but see
at this point.
But see the problem with that, and like this is just my speculation and like my. See, I have a very general understanding of like fitness and diet and everything. Like obviously people that went to school and studied it, I'll leave it to them. But my understanding is that, and my speculation is, he puts on so much weight during the off season that when he does come back to preseason, and this is also issues that I faced. Once you do start with that heavy load training with that extra weight, you have much more chance of getting injured, and that's probably where all his injuries keep coming from as well. Like he can't seem to shake that weight.
He needs to do the old Ricky Hatton. Remember Ricky Hatton they used to call him Ricky Fatten between fights because he used to just be in the pub eating chips and down in pints. And then he would wear like a garbage bag in his training so that he would sweat it all out during his like 10-week training regime. Eden Hazard needs to get in touch, see if he can do it. And also before we go to England, I just want to ask you a quick question. Is Luka Jovic the worst signing or the worst Real Madrid signing in their history? How much did they sign him for? Like 45 million from Eintracht?
I thought it was like 50.
They're now
or
just
60.
letting him go to Fiorentina on a free. What? And when it happened, I was just like, Luka Jovic is not a Real Madrid player. What are they thinking with that signing? And he barely got on the park for him.
Yeah.
Madness.
Look, I'd have to. You know how sometimes like I don't know if you follow like these like football Facebook pages, but sometimes they put those like top 10 videos and stuff. I think there was a Real Madrid one or like even a Barca one in terms of signings, or it might have been an Arsenal one, and you're just like, really, that player played for them? So you'd have to really look through the history books if you want to go down the whole worst signing in Real Madrid's history.
Yeah.
Before you reworded it, worst signing in history, I'm giving it to Coutinho.
Yeah, I know. That's why I stopped myself. That's why I changed it to
But yeah,
Real.
but Real Madrid's history, I don't know, because wasn't there a couple of in that first era with the Galacticos? Because like they signed I think like Cassano didn't was it Cassano? I think yeah, Cassano he didn't make any sort of impact. I don't know if he left on a
Casano's a
free.
Casado was a FIFA legend. Remember, I think he gets up to like 98 overall in one of the
Yeah, but
FIFAs.
he never hit his stride.
Yeah, no.
Michael Owen as well never hit his stride,
Like,
but I think he had a better goal return than Jovic. I think Jovic only scored like 3 or 4 goals for Real Madrid. I don't know how many appearances, but yeah, like I don't think he ever hit double digits in his whole Real Madrid career. I don't think he hit double digits.
yeah,
But
we need we
fact check me on that one. But I'm pretty sure it's something along those lines. But yeah, like I
we
think
need.
possibly worst signing in Real Madrid's history.
Yeah, I was gonna say we need the listeners to just leave it in the comments if they could think of any worse, because off the top of my head, I can't to spend that much money on a player like that. There was never a Real Madrid quality, and then he just sort of somewhat proved it. But I think now would be a good time to go across and go to England and look what's happening there. And I guess we sort of touched on it, but we'll go into a little bit more depth for the top two, or what we expect to be the top two. I mean, we say this as though it's just a continue, or I'm saying this as though it's a continuation of last season. We don't know how the new season will shape up, but what I saw of Liverpool against Leipzig in that most recent friendly, and what I saw of City against Bayern, they physically mainly for me, it looks like they haven't missed a beat. It looks like they're just these two teams are just machines, and they just keep going the whole time. I don't think many of the Liverpool players, if they do enjoy the eating in the off season, they don't show it, and it's the same for the City team. And I just think that's the thing that stands out to me watching the preseason, especially of these two teams, but pretty much of everyone. Arsenal impressed me as well. Real Madrid against Barcelona was a high intensity game. So this preseason, I think, has been one of the better preseasons I've seen in terms of the quality of football, and I think a lot of that is to do with um, most of these teams are doing their work in the transfer market early, and they're having time with these players, and you can pretty much already see it. And like you said, the World Cup is going to factor into this season. So, how much are they condensing this first half of the season to fit it in? I haven't looked at the fixtures, but that will be interesting to see. So, if these two teams look like they're just rolling from the back of last season, I think that puts them at a pretty big advantage over the rest of the field. And then when you look at the fact that they've both added that next dimension in the striker areas for both teams. Uh, I don't know. Is it possible that we're going to see higher quality of football from both of these teams going into this season? What's your read on these two going into the season?
Personally, I'm really excited to see Haaland in the Premier League because every time I've seen him in the Champions League or even in Bundesliga, like, he just looks an absolute beast, like an absolute menace. And I want to see whether he dominates those physical defenders, or whether they get the one up on him. So that's going to be a really really interesting battle.
Are you talking
For me.
about any physical defenders in particular coming into your mind when you make that comment?
Well, what the obvious one is Van Dijk, like the pops.
That's going to be fun.
So that's it's gonna. But I want to see how he goes in the Premier League because he has all of the qualities, like all the physical qualities, and even like the technical qualities as well to succeed. So it's all just about keeping fit and staying sharp mentally and on top of things mentally to see how that will go. But yeah, I'm pretty excited to see how he's gonna fare, and like I guess because like and the way City play, like it just seemed like they lacked that finisher, that clinical finisher last season. Even though, yeah, I think they scored like 90 plus goals in the league, but had they have had someone like a Haaland or even Aguero, like you look back at the Real Madrid game, especially the first leg, that I remember I said that like they should, in the first half alone, they should have had 5 or 6 goals in the first half. They created that many chances, that many like clear cut chances as well. And I've heard other pundits say this, like signing Haaland, he wasn't signed to win the league. Like winning the league would you say it's a coin flip at the moment between City or Liverpool? But I'll let you answer that in a sec. But like Haaland was signed to be the difference maker in those Real Madrid games in the semi-finals, or in the Champions League final going 2 years back against Chelsea. He was signed to be the difference in those games.
Yeah, and I've heard a similar thing. I might have brought it up on one of the late season pods last season, but I want to offer a counter perspective, and actually, just when you was talking about Haaland and talking about obviously how much of a machine he is, for me that almost makes him better prepared and better suited for league football and the Premier League, and banging in goals every week in the Premier League in what is a physical league, which should play into his strengths, much like the Bundesliga did. And it's great for him that he had that upbringing in terms of recent upbringing in terms of Austrian Bundesliga and then the Bundesliga in Germany and now Premier League. I think that's a good path to take in terms of dealing with similar tests. So for me, when you were just talking about him and then talk about the coin flip question, my immediate reaction was, I think Haaland makes City pretty clear favourites for the league. But when I look at the Champions League and I look at those big games, while I think his talent is so great, he can obviously make the difference in those games. We haven't seen it yet, and he's still a young player. So there's still got to be question marks around him being that player. So I guess that just offers a little counter perspective where I think it makes them pretty heavy favourites for the league. Whereas the Champions League, for me, they've strengthened their chances, but only slightly, because the Champions League, in its nature, in just the tournament nature itself, is such a hard competition to win in the sense that if things go against you, there's little time to make up for that. You've only got 2 legs, and I mean, 2 legs is still more than like those one-off games, like a final, but that's all you've got. Like, and if things go wrong for a 15-minute period and you've got 2 goals in that time, you don't have, I don't know what, 20 more games after that to make up for it. You've only got the next 100 and whatever minutes. So the nature of the competition and the fact that we haven't seen Haaland do it, I just think, because obviously it's Erling Haaland, so that obviously increases their chances. It doesn't, for me, looking at it from this perspective, it doesn't increase them exponentially. Whereas in the league, it somewhat does. I think it tips the balance into them a lot heavier than Liverpool. To be quite honest, I just fancy City. The fact that they already won it last season, and then they've added either the best or second best young striker in the world to their team. It just makes them very formidable, and they're going to be very hard to beat in a 38 game season.
Who else have Liverpool brought in though, on top of Nunez? Because like we keep talking about Nunez and Haaland, but I think earlier in the show I mentioned that Calvin Phillips was also signed by City as well. So that's a pretty big signing too.
Well, that will be an interesting one because no one's displacing Rodri, and especially at this stage of his career, he's not old, so he can play pretty much week in week out. He's shown that he can do that. He's a machine that way, much like all the players in these City and Liverpool teams. So that in itself, that signing is a really interesting one. Are they going to play a double pivot with those two? That's a super physical sort of double pivot, but technically, I mean, Rodri's pretty good. Calvin Phillips has got a great range of passing, but in the tighter areas, I don't know if that suits what Guardiola really wants to do. We'll see. Maybe Calvin Phillips might even play as a centre back in games that they dominate a lot more, next to Diaz. So that in itself is an interesting signing. In terms of what Liverpool have done, I think they've only bought in. I don't know his first name, but Carvalho, the young kid from, I'm pretty sure, the Championship. I think he came from Fulham. Um, but apart from that, it's just Nunez really. And Klopp has said, we're not really gonna look to make any more signings, barring injuries or anything like that. So they've pretty much gone one for one, I think, because the main thing is, and it's not a new signing, but Liverpool have obviously re-signed Mo Salah.
I
Um,
think you've re-signed Matip as well, was it? Or was it?
I didn't see that one, but I
No,
wouldn't be
or was it
surprised.
Gomez? One of them signed an extension, and yeah, like you said, Salah's signed an extension as well.
Yeah, and obviously the Salah one's interesting in of itself because Liverpool have somewhat broken their wage structure to do that. But I don't think there's many other players in the world the way you would do that for. And Mo Salah is so embedded in sort of this team's identity. I think when you look at it all in all, as much as you can have little reservations now, other players are going to want that money. And I guess, I mean, maybe that's how Liverpool move into the next stratosphere on a more permanent basis by doing this, because definitely their standing in world football at this present moment warrants them doing something like that, because all the other big clubs are paying their players at least that much. I think that's. I don't think Salah was overly greedy in terms of that. He was just
How
looking
much
at the
is it?
market and saying, I think it's £350,000 a week. Um, and obviously, I think the next closest is 220. Um, so obviously, I just think Salah was looking out at the market and saying, well, I'm one of the best in the world, and these guys are all getting paid 400, 500, whatever it is. So I think I'm worth at least 350, and I guess it was somewhat right for Liverpool to do that, because he is worth that in the market. And the thing that gets me is the work rate, the way he can lead by example in that sense. I think in terms of superstars, there's not many. Probably there's no superstar in the world better suited to being Liverpool superstar than Mo Salah. So all in all, you can have reservations about breaking up the wage structure, but I think it was the right move. I don't know if you what your thoughts are on the retention, and probably you could allude to letting Mane go at the same time as well.
Yeah, so like
How yeah,
that's the thing. You guys let Mane go, so like you know what? It's before I get on to like actually I'll mention it now. Like I mentioned last season that there's a chance that it could have a ripple on effect because Van Dijk's contract comes up. I think he still has 2 years left, so they're gonna have to start negotiating soon. You got Robertson as well. You got Trent Alexander-Arnold. All these other players who are mainstays to the team, their contracts are going to start coming up, and Van Dijk's going to have to be put up to like 300, maybe even 350 or thereabouts, because he's in that Salah sort of pay structure. Like he deserves to be in that structure. Allison as well. So all these guys are going to get bumped up. So it's going to have that sort of knock-on effect. And considering that now the club's maximum has gone up, that means that other, like for instance, if Salah was stayed on like let's say 250, that was the club's maximum 250, and then I think Trent at the moment is on like 100. So Trent probably would have only went
I
up
think
to go
I
on.
actually think Trent's on a really good contract. I think he's on like 160 or
Is
180.
he?
I think Robbo's on. Yeah, I think Robbo's on like 60 though.
Okay,
So
but
yeah,
let's just say let's say it's 150 for Trent, and let's say Salah stayed on 250. So Trent only probably would have went up to like maybe 180 to 200. But now that Salah's on
yeah.
350, Trent's probably going to go up to 250. So it raises it. it means that you have to raise everyone else's wages in like respectively, the people that deserve it at least. Um, so that's going to be interesting how Liverpool handle that. But it's similar to, I guess, the what happened a couple of years ago with Sanchez and Ozil at Arsenal, where both their contracts came up the exact same time. They didn't have the funds to re-sign both of them, so they had to basically pick between one or the other. I think Sanchez made his intentions to leave more so than Ozil, but you couldn't afford to lose both of them. And the same thing now with Mane and Salah. You can't afford to lose both of them, so you have to sell one and you have to re-sign one. So it was a bit of a tough situation for you guys. Like if you had have sold Salah as well, what players are out there that could have replaced him? Like maybe not replaced him to the exact effect, like where it's a like for like replacement, but even like someone who's maybe 3 or 4 years or even 5 years younger, who can, let's say Salah's like a 10 out of 10, who can provide 7 or 8 out of 10 performances week in, week out. Like at least to that effect, and then maybe in a year or two, then they can get up to like close to Salah's level. Like who's out there at all?
Well, I think maybe one they would have looked at might have been Rafinha from Leeds, who obviously isn't at that level. But Liverpool, I don't think Liverpool would see. Another name that came to my mind was maybe a Serge Gnabry, but he's already been at a huge club with big wages, and I think Liverpool avoid that. They go for players who aren't coming from another huge club, because if they're coming from a huge club, the likelihood is their wages are pretty much out of Liverpool's wage structure anyway. So a player sort of like that, like a Rafinha at Leeds, I think would have been one that they would have looked at. Off the top of my head, I can't think of many other names like that, but that would be the profile I think they'd look at.
I'm not sure Nabry's on a very large contract because I don't think Bayern Munich can necessarily break the bank on contracts. So they're sort of similar to Liverpool in that sense.
Yeah, somewhat, but I still think they pay. I
They
think Lewandowski, for example, was on wages that we definitely couldn't afford at Bayern. So I think in a few cases they do. I think overall they pay a bit more than Liverpool too
Yeah, probably
in terms
if
of
you take if
wages.
you add up like the entire team's wages, it probably is higher than most likely is higher than Liverpool's. But I wouldn't say that like if you compare, for instance, because like Bayern's obvious, like you'd consider them a semi-final team in the Champions League, like pretty much every season for the last couple of
Yeah,
seasons. I don't think their wage structure comes close to a City's or a Chelsea's or a Real Madrid's
yeah,
or a
yeah.
Barcelona's.
I agree. I agree there. It would take a little bit of homework, but the feeling you get is
Yeah,
that they definitely spend less than those teams. I think we can both agree that Liverpool City is shaping up to be mouth-watering this season. I guess it would be a little bit naive, maybe, to think, well, maybe not naive, but we'll see how the season pans out. But do you think that there's any teams who finished just below those two last season? Do you think there's anyone who could start knocking on the door of those two in this upcoming Premier League season?
it pains me to say this, but in terms of transfer activity and I guess the Conte effect, Tottenham could. I don't think that they'll be more of a. How should I put this? I think they're going to clinch third and nibble at the toes of City and Liverpool, but I don't think they're going to necessarily like challenge hard. And I think Chelsea are a really weird one because their preseason hasn't been that great. So I have a feeling they're going to be battling for that fourth spot rather than clinching third like they did last season.
Okay, so within that, I guess the question I want to ask you is, do you think, and I guess your answer is you've pretty much already given it, but who do you think had a better summer, Arsenal or Tottenham?
I think Tottenham signed. It's hard to say because Tottenham signed about like 5 or 6 players, whereas
Mm.
Arsenal have
I think.
signed four, but like one of them
All right.
in
So
Marquinhos is a young one. But like I think the quality of the signings that we've made could potentially be better and
so
have a bigger impact.
I guess we have to go through the signing. So for Tottenham, it's Basuma.
That's a big one.
It's Yeah, that's a good signing. I liked him at Brighton last season. Perisic, who I've always liked, especially with a 3 or a 5 at the back, however you want to call it, is Longley as probably that left centre back to play. Look, I've never been that big a fan of him, so it
Mm.
remains to be seen, especially in the Premier League. Um, and then there was that young kid. Who else? And Richarlison for Tottenham. Am I missing anyone?
Uh, I swear there might be one more. Um, I'd have to really have a
Yeah, I
look.
think they got a young kid, but in terms of players I've seen play, they're the only ones who I have. And then Arsenal um, obviously have Gabriel Jesus, who's probably the big signing there. Um, and who else did they get? Refresh me.
Zinchenko,
And Zinchenko, and then
Marquinhos,
that
and Vieira.
Vieira, who I haven't seen much of Vieira. I haven't seen
Yeah,
any of
he came in.
Marquinhos.
Marquinhos, I think he played at like about 15 minutes against Chelsea. He seemed okay. I think I haven't seen him in the other games that they played. But Vieira, I think, has like this little niggling little foot injury or something. Like when he first came to
Yeah,
Arsenal a couple of weeks ago, when he first signed, like he was pictured with one of those moon boots. So, but like they said, it was a bit more of a precaution than anything else. But just going on to Tottenham, they signed Jed Spence from.
yeah. He was the one I was thinking of.
He looked. I remember watching against Arsenal in the FA Cup. He looked very good. Who else? I think that's all the. Oh, and they signed Fraser Forster as well as a backup goalkeeper.
Yeah, as a backup.
Yeah.
And I guess for Arsenal as well, the other one who isn't a new signing but who's coming back is William Saliba,
Yeah,
who I thought was pretty impressive at Marseille last
that's
season. So
he won Young Player of the Year, I think.
yeah, exactly.
But that could be a very that is pretty much like a new signing because like he hasn't played for Arsenal,
Mm.
he hasn't played in the Premier League, so he could be very very pivotal, and like just fortify that defense. And you know how before we were talking about those sort of centre backs playing as right backs. I think Ben White played
Yeah,
for
he
Brighton
did.
as a right back at times,
Yeah, and
and
and that
he
that leads. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I'm just saying, like he and Tommy Astos had his injury woes pretty much since January. He hasn't been consistently be able to play. So, and like Cedric is there as a proper right back, but but
No more Cedric.
yeah, but
If you guys want
having
to be successful, no more Cedric.
having Ben White there as I guess like a second or even third choice right back. Like it means we have cover, and like one thing that I wanted to mention when you were talking about like centre backs playing in like left back or right back, I think now we're starting to see that. I guess maybe it's like in a footballing sense, like how football goes through its transitions and its periods of like those 10-15 year periods of a certain style. I think now we're starting to see that style where the back four transitions to a back three, and then that's when you need, I guess, that third centre back who can play a left or right back, even though his first choice position is centre back, but like he can double up as a left or right back, and we're probably going to start seeing more of that from other teams because I think Liverpool have started doing that with Gomez. Like towards the end of the season, he started playing right back for you guys. City don't really do that, but they do that. Oh, they sort of do that with Walker because Walker can play as a third centre back, and even though his first position is the right back. And
Well,
then
that's
Real Madrid have been doing it as well, and I'm not sure Barca might start doing it as well. So there's a couple of teams that are starting to transition to that sort of pattern of play when they're in possession.
Yeah, definitely. And I think those examples you gave are the more traditional sort of transformation that we see in terms of a fullback who goes and plays as a third centre back. But now we're kind of seeing the inverse with centre backs playing as fullbacks. And I guess in terms of cycles, it almost goes back to the 90s, the early thousands, where defenders, first and foremost, you wanted them to have good defensive qualities. So you'd see a whole back four who might have had the qualities of all of them of centre backs, really, in today's game, especially. And as well, you've got to think in the upbringing that even if a player eventually becomes a centre back, um, most of the time, if they're not physically superior their whole lives, they're going to have to do a sort of a stint as either a right or a left back, depending on their foot, until they get into the centre of defence. Like a Jamie Carragher, for example, did that at Liverpool. Had to play right back before he went into at centre back, and
Maldini
so
did it as well, didn't he? Played left back.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it's just something interesting I've seen. I haven't weighed up the pros and cons of it just yet and analysed it properly because obviously, as high quality as these preseason games have been, they're still not real games. So yeah, it's just an interesting development on that. But no doubt, Ben White gives you that versatility there. And if I was an Arsenal fan, where I'd really hope that he could maybe give us some versatility would be central midfield. Because what happens if, and I say if, but I really want to say when, Thomas Partey gets injured this season? What happens for Arsenal then? That's the one position they haven't addressed. As much as, and I guess to answer my own question from before, I actually prefer Arsenal's summer window. I think Gabriel Jesus has the potential to be a fantastic signing for them. I've been waiting for him to finally break out, and it
It looks
for
like it.
whatever reason it never happened at City. But if I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be very optimistic that his time would be now.
Yeah.
And another little factor that I wanted to point out was, and I missed it in the late last season, but Arteta's connections within Man City to get Zinchenko and Jesus, I think, have been really beneficial and a main reason why I prefer your window over a Tottenham window, because while they're players who Man City are getting rid of, that's still Man City. That's arguably the best team in the world. So to be getting the rejects, and I say
They're
that in
not.
quotation
Yeah.
marks, from Manchester City is a pretty good place to be getting those players from. So yeah, that's why I prefer Arsenal's window. But that that when Partey gets injured, that one scares the life out of me if I'm an Arsenal supporter.
Yeah. See, that's going to be interesting how Arteta, I guess, covers for him, because Zinchenko plays midfield for Ukraine, so I think he was brought in as like a sort of cover for both Tierney and possibly Partey, even though Zinchenko isn't, I guess, that deep lying sort of break of play defensive mid that Partey is, but you do have a player again that can play two different positions. El Neni has re-signed as well, he's a decent cover. Like he's a very good squad player. I think you're never going to get like a 9 or 10 out of 10 performance out of him, but you're always going to get consistent 6s or 7s. Like you're going to get the basics from him, but you're never going to get anything like really exciting or match winning from him. Like so that still isn't. I guess a position that needs to be addressed, because Fabio Vieira, I think he's more of an attacking mid as well. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure how they're going to address that issue. And like you said, it most likely, knowing the history, it most likely will occur that like an injury in that defensive mid position.
Yeah, and probably looking at the balance of it now after Tottenham's window. the fact that they've brought in an Eve Basuma, who I
Yeah,
think you guys could have
I think we were trying to go for
desperately
him,
used. Yeah,
but
yeah, and it would surprise.
yeah, but I think we're rumored to. I think we've put in a bid for Tielemans and also for Milinkovic Savic. So we're going for either one of those players, or potentially even both.
Yeah, and I think at least one of them would be a really good signing. Still not quite. Tielemans can maybe do the role. Milinkovic Savic definitely couldn't do the deep lying role for me. I don't think he's that type of player. Maybe Tielemans could just about do it, but still not quite addressing that. But I guess
Mm.
at the same time, you don't want a player as good as Partey as his backup because that brings about its own problems. But just relying on a Thomas Partey fills me with a bit of dread because he's a good player, but he's injury prone and he's somewhat proved that already in his career. So it's a toss up. It really is because when you factor in what you said before, the Conte effect, it's really going to be a toss up. And I think by the way we're talking about them, we believe that these teams are the best prime teams to go 3-4 and close out the Champions League spots, which, unless you have more to add on Tottenham and Arsenal, I think should bring us to the teams that we haven't mentioned yet who would be expecting to be challenging for that spot.
Well, I just want to mention, like with Arsenal, I've watched a couple of their. I watched the highlights from their preseason games. I did watch the Chelsea Arsenal game as well. That was like what on Saturday, I think, or Sunday. Um, and I got to say, with their preseason, I'm pretty impressed with how they're going and how they're gelling as a team. And the Jesus factor is, you mentioned as well. Like he's given them a massive lift, and I think bringing in him and also Zinchenko, who were with City, and Jesus was more of a starter than Zinchenko. Zinchenko was probably like he was the backup essentially, but like bringing in those two players with like that winning mentality as well is going to really help the young players around, and I think also with Jesus bringing in another Brazilian to help with Martinelli and also now Marquinhos, who they brought in, uh, could help them with, I guess, especially with Marquinhos settling into England. Martinelli's already he's already, I guess, sort of put his front foot forward last season and shown what he's capable of or potentially capable of. But yeah, having that, I guess, that that Brazilian sort of cohesion or like little group of players, it's going to help with especially with Marquinhos to see how he develops. But overall, I'm pretty impressed with Arsenal, and I am excited. I just hope that they don't do what they always do and like lose their opening game of the season or draw it. Because we do have a bit of a tough team, and it's a bit of a bogey team with us in Crystal Palace. So it's gonna be interesting to see how we start it.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with those sentiments as well. I think behind what I saw of City against Bayern and behind what I saw of Liverpool against Leipzig, probably Arsenal were the third most impressive team I watched in the opening of that game against Chelsea. I did like the one that you didn't mention was Saliba. I think he's going to be massive for you guys coming in into defence and maybe freeing up Ben White to play the right back, maybe as a double pivot next to Partey. We'll see how that progresses, and as well the way Saka and Erdegaard were linking up further up the pitch as well as Jesus, giving you fresh life up front. So a lot. I totally agree. There's a lot to be positive about as an Arsenal supporter, but I just couldn't get over the fact that Partey is the only holding midfielder. So we'll see how that one progresses. But then I guess we got to touch on the flip side of that game that we both saw bits of, and Chelsea. And I don't know if you saw them, but I saw the comments Tuchel made after the match, and it's crazy to think that he could be making these comments so close to the start of a season, and that Chelsea can appear so far off ready for the start of a season, which is coming up pretty soon. And then, obviously, if reports are to believe, they're going to miss out on Kunde, which will be massive. They desperately need another top centre back. I know in the portion of the game that I watched, I didn't get to see Koulibaly play for him, which is obviously a massive loss. But he was playing a 4-3-3, and you just look at it, the players out there. Gallagher and Mount seem way too similar in their roles. You're almost going back to the bad old days of leaving Jorginho isolated in midfield by himself, and he's too lightweight to do that. Um, Werner's just not the guy, and that was a big miss for me personally as well, because I thought once he left Leipzig, I thought it was just the only way was up for him, but he is just not it at all. Every time I watch that guy play, he is a million miles away from looking like a clinical, sharp striker. He doesn't even look quick anymore, and that used to be his main threat, his pace. He just doesn't even look quick. Sterling, look, I've as good as he is, I've never been a huge fan. I think he's a good addition, but he's not really an addition. They need those centre backs desperately. So Chelsea, I know it's preseason. I don't want to take too much away from it, but for Tuchel to come out and just say they're not ready, and for that to be so glaringly obvious, I think is worrying. So close to the season. I don't know if you share those sentiments.
They, yeah, they don't seem like a team that has that cohesion or that hasn't gelled or clicked yet. And like it started to show, like pretty much from January this year, like that they they were starting to lose that sort of chemistry and that cohesion, and it's like it hasn't been addressed at all during this preseason, which is actually pretty interesting and I guess disappointing if you're a Chelsea fan. And in that Arsenal game, they just seemed, especially the first half, they seemed lifeless and without ideas. Like they looked like they were actually run off the park, which isn't. It's not ordinary for a Chelsea team, because Chelsea teams are usually very solid, very strong. They have lots of legs, and they don't get run over like that, especially not by an Arsenal team. And look, it's pre-season. You can't really take, especially regarding the result, you can't take too much from it. But the performance, if the performance is an indication of how things are going to go, they could falter at the very beginning of the season, which could then, and if they pick up steam, because they faltered at the beginning of the season, it could put them at risk of clinching that fourth spot.
Yeah, and that's almost a bit of a byproduct of what Liverpool and City have done to the league in recent years. Um, they've almost somewhat, especially if you want to be knocking on their door, they're telling the other teams you need to keep a ridiculous pace. You need to start strong, you need to have a strong middle, and you need to finish strong. There can be no lulls where you lose 2 or 3 games in the space of 8 or 10. You just can't have those periods if they're gonna continue the way that they played last season, and where at least one of them for the past 5 seasons has been playing at that pace. If anyone else wants to start looking at winning titles, they have to go at a ridiculous pace. I don't think traditionally, the pace for top four obviously has never been that. But the byproduct from those two setting that pace is that the ones below need to set a quicker pace as well. So that'll be interesting to see, especially if, like you say, they start dropping a few points early in the season. Yeah, so if they're dropping anything early in the season, then that definitely jeopardizes their chance of being fighting to get into that top two. And then depending on how, I think we agree it's Arsenal and Tottenham, how they're doing, then they could be even too far behind for top four. So, but the other thing that we need to mention, while we're trying to trying to make strong points here is that there's still over a month of the transfer market left, the transfer window left. So they have enough time to address. I was quite excited to see the names they were linked with in terms of a Kunde and a Kimpembe. I think they're good players who Tuchel could use in a back three quite comfortably. And then obviously already the signing of Koulibaly is a good one. Uh, Obviously Kovacic and Kante didn't play in the game against Arsenal. But the lack of striker, like it hampered him last season, I don't think Sterling's the answer there. I know he has a pretty good goal scoring record, but I don't think he's the answer as the goal scorer for the team if you want to be really challenging for everything. So, and another thing that we didn't mention is the keys got the ownership keys to Chelsea got handed over in the summer. So we're looking at a new owner who might be wanting to make a statement. Maybe Sterling was his statement signing. So in terms of functionality for the team, maybe it's not all that. So I don't know. Just what I've seen of Chelsea, like you say, back end of last season, and now the summer transfer window. While I love Koulibaly, great signing. If they can't get more defenders around him, I don't know. I put it's hard to say. Maybe I'm overreacting from the Arsenal result and from what Tuchel's saying. Um, but it's hard to put them above Arsenal and Tottenham at the start of the season. And just one final interesting point on Tuchel: the last two jobs that he's been at in Dortmund and PSG, the third season's been his last season. So be interested to see if that pattern repeats here at Chelsea this season.
Just one thing on the ownership. I've heard somewhere that apparently, you know how Abramovich used to be the one that would like sign players and like say, "Oh, I want this guy, I want this guy," and the manager, and then he'd just be like to the manager, "You got to deal with it." I think now apparently Tuchel's had a lot more input into what players he wants. So Sterling, for instance, is a Tuchel signing more than the new owner signing, from what I've heard. So it's someone that Tuchel wanted, and like you said, and I agree with it. I'm not too impressed by that signing. I think it it doesn't really it doesn't make sense to me, that signing. Whereas like a Jesus to Arsenal makes a lot more sense in terms of how it's going to work and the fact that Arteta and Jesus have worked together as well. So like you know what I'm saying. Like some signings make absolute sense, whereas like some signings are like, how is this going to work? And I'm questioning that signing more than any other signing really in this transfer window thus far.
Yeah, I don't think it makes complete sense when you got Ziyech, you got Pulisic, not being able to get game time, and how much better is Raheem Sterling than those two? He's a little bit better. He's a little bit of an upgrade maybe, but he's also he must be pushing 30, if not already at 30 by now. So
He's
yeah,
27.
I don't think he's 27.
Yeah,
Wow, he's been around for
yeah,
he's like Rooney, isn't he? He's just been
yeah,
around forever, so he
yeah.
feels so much older.
Actually,
So
I put him
I
more
guess
as a
he's
Walcott.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's better. I think Rudy hit higher peaks for sure. Although Sterling has now joined the 100 club in the Premier League, which is no mean feat. So
yeah.
maybe I'm not giving him enough credit, but he's a good player with great movement, really nippy, good ball control. But the thing I can't get over with Sterling is that he can't strike a ball. He's just not very good at striking a football. He doesn't like, and to watch him last season, he took a few free kicks for Man City, and I'm like, no, Man City have about six players better at striking a football than you. I don't think you should be standing over this free kick. So I don't know. Maybe that's a bit of pent up resentment at the way he left Liverpool for City, but he's a good player, but he's not a great player. He doesn't move the needle, so to say, I think, to make Chelsea a genuine player in that top two, to be knocking on that door to make it a top three, like they looked like doing for most of last season, to be fair to them. But that the defense needs to be addressed. Koulibaly is a great start, but if they miss out on Kunde, I'm In fact, a lot hinges on that. If they get Kunde, I'm a lot more excited for them. And I look, I'd probably put them back up to third above Tottenham and Arsenal if they get him. But if and it looks like they're not, if they don't get him and don't get at least a Kimpembe, then like I said, I can't put them above Arsenal and Tottenham going into the season. But then they might start playing football and it might look completely different. So who knows? We're trying to take deductions from preseason, which never really rarely goes well because preseason is such a different animal. But I guess it's just the eye test and what we've seen in terms of signing. So interesting to see how that one pans out. I guess if you don't have anything else to add, is there much to touch on in terms of United? Do you have much more to say than what you said at the start?
Not really. Like they finally signed that Lissandro Martinez, and they signed some young player from, was it from Feyenoord? I don't want to. Malaysia, Tyrell Malaysia.
Yeah,
So
I haven't
they've
seen.
only made two sign. Malaysia is 22 and Martinez is 24. I don't know. Like I it just seems like the same old United, and it's so strange to see so little activity or excitement or buzz around United, and that no one is like banging down the door to join United like they were like back when Fergie was there. Like you have players that want to leave United. Like Ronaldo wants to get the hell out of there. By all rumors and reports. Who knows how true that is, but that's why they're just rumors. But yeah, like they can't attract players. It just seems, which is really surprising and worrying for United. So yeah, I can't really see them challenging for top four, let alone like getting in there.
Well, the one probably big signing they did make, who we haven't mentioned, is Christian Eriksen on a free. After
Yeah,
we sort of
yeah.
touched on that late in the season, but that's probably along with Martinez, who admittedly I haven't seen that much of Martinez play, but the fact that he's a 5'9" centre back, and I don't want to do the sort of physical elitist thing of the Premier League, but that worries me a little bit
No,
because
I saw someone put a post up about other like top defenders in the Premier League. I think like Carragher was like 5'9", 5'10".
5'10". Yeah,
So
Carragher was 5'10", but he's pushing it about
yeah,
as far as I'd want,
like
as
he's
short as
not
I'd want a centre
yeah,
back.
but like he's not like elite. He was never like an elite centre back, but he was a very good centre back.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I swear there was a couple others, like maybe not even from Premier League, but I think like Puyol was 5'10" or something, or
yeah. I
thereabouts.
think it was around the
And
same.
and
But
like and
Spain and England are completely
yeah, look,
different
like
for that matter.
I guess like even when in the Champions League you're going up against the top English teams, and Puyol proved himself against those top English teams. So and I can't remember the other ones that were mentioned, but there were a handful of other ones, and I know that they played in the Premier League as well, who were like under 6 foot, so like 5'10", 5'11". I'm not sure whether 5'9" was the lowest, but I honestly don't think height is going to play the biggest determining factor, like because he could be an absolutely excellent defender, despite his height. So we'll see how he goes.
Yeah, it's not the biggest determining factor, but in England, it's more important than other places, and I don't think it ever hurts to to be 6'4" and look like Virgil van Dijk when you're trying to be an elite Premier League defender.
Is
So
Van Dijk actually
I don't
six
know.
four?
I think he's 6'3", 6'4". I think he's around that height. He's imperious. He's massive.
I want to see how tall he is now.
But yeah, I still have my reservations because my memory Well, one of my memories of Jamie Carragher was anytime he came up against Didier Drogba, he got his arse handed to him because Drogba's just a beast. And I think of Lissandro Martinez up against an Erling Haaland, and I don't like that matchup very much. So you'd
Yeah.
hope that he'd be getting help from old mate Harry at the
Oi.
heart of that defense.
Oi.
We-
Oi.
uh, but I don't know. Yeah, I saw a bit of United's game against Aston Villa, and they did. I know it was on a muddy pitch in Perth, and why any team would want to have their pre-season in Australia when it's the middle of winter is beyond me. Those players must be hating the management for organising that trip because you could have been going at least to sunny America where it's summer. Like you come over here
and
in the
the
middle of winter.
and the pitches are actual football pitches. They're not
Yeah,
like cricket pitches or AFL pitches as well. Like they're actual football pitches. So like the ground is different.
yeah, absolutely. So even with that all factored in, the starting 11 didn't fill me with confidence. The way they played didn't look all that different. I don't know if you follow like Gimme Sport on Facebook, but
Nah, I don't.
the Ten Hag propaganda is just ridiculous. And you know that if they lose the first game of the season, they'll be out on Ten Hag straight away. That shit just boils my blood when I see that. They were ready to write off Darwin Nunez before he scored 4 goals against Leipzig, and then all of a sudden they're back on him. It's just madness. But I from last season as well, I have my reservations on the whole Ten Hag appointment. So that's one that's gonna be interesting. And they haven't, like you've alluded to already, they haven't been able to attract players. And if they can't attract players, which I don't think was ever going to be their game plan after the summer they had last year. But the fact that they haven't been able, like, where does your optimism come as a United fan? I guess it comes from Ten Hag and hoping that his message can resonate with these players somehow. But even if it does, are these players good enough to accomplish anything? I guess Bruno Fernandes is apart from David De Gea, I guess as well. But which other players in that United squad have flirted with being world class? Have even been on the precipice of being world class players?
And we're not going to put Ronaldo in that mix, are we?
No,
Because
of course not, because he doesn't even want to be there,
yeah.
which is a circus in of itself.
Sancho at Dortmund, everyone was raving about him, and
I would say a world class prospect, a world class young player, but
like
never an
prospect.
actual.
But I've also heard that like a lot of the England players when he was like with the England camp, everyone said he was the best technical player like on the ball. Like there wasn't anyone better in the team on the ball than him. So, but like as soon as he joined United, like you're like, is this really the player that you wanted to last year pay or were potentially going to pay 120 mil for? Because I think that was what Dortmund were asking for the season before they signed him. I think Rashford showed signs like 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, no one.
I'm asking world class though. I'm
Yeah,
not
like
asking
I guess in terms of like there's no one really world class, but in terms of prospects, you had Sancho and you had Rashford prospects.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this squad doesn't fill me with confidence, and you know what? Like the management doesn't fill me with confidence either, because like it almost feels like, at least thus, I know we still have a month left or like 34 days or whatever of the transfer window, but so far their dealings in the transfer market, it's almost like Ten Hag is doomed to fail unless he can like get this team to actually turn things around and gel and work for one another. Otherwise, it's just going to be the same sort of Solskjaer appointment or whatever. Like it's just going to be the same issue. Whereas like you contrast that with, and I'll go back to Arteta. Like as soon as Arteta came in, they started signing players that he wanted. It started offloading players that he didn't want. And now it seems like he has I think they need one more like maybe the winter or next summer. Like they need that one more transfer window to get his entire squad. Because I think I saw something that out of the 23 players that won the FA Cup three years ago with Arteta, there's only 7 players left. So that just goes to show the entire rebuild that he has done at Arsenal. And Ten Hag so far this summer, I can't see that same sort of rebuild. But we still have a month. We still have a month left. So who knows? Maybe they could sign 3 or 4 new players.
Yeah, that's the thing. We still have a month left, and we still haven't had a ball kick of the season. So it could look completely different, and we could be made to look very foolish. But we can only go off what we've seen, and I guess that's what we're trying to report, what we've seen so far. I guess the last little interesting thing from the Premier League is a non-story, and that non-story for me is Newcastle. Were they not meant to have a big window this window? At least signing some players?
We talked about it, and I think I've said like they are in a very precarious position at the moment where if they just go gun ho on the market and signing signing players that are like 20% above value, they're gonna break the bank. And they're going to violate so much of that financial fair play regulation that they're going to screw themselves and they're going to shoot themselves in the foot because teams know, these guys have unlimited resources. We can sell them. We can sell them a player that's like 10, 20% overvalue than what he is. And then also on top of that, the wages as well. Like they could end up screwing themselves with the wages as well. So they're in a very I'm trying to find the right word, but yeah, they're in a very they're in a very like balanced position where it could go one way where they completely destroy themselves financially, or they do things right and they do a slow build, which it looks like that's what they're trying to do. So they're trying to do something similar to what City have done. That the only thing is Newcastle doesn't exactly have the same, like as a city, and this is no disrespect for them, but like Newcastle doesn't exactly have the same prestige as like a Manchester as a city or a location. So yeah, they're in a difficult spot, I reckon.
It's maybe not quite the same as Manchester, but still the north of England. Manchester is, I mean, I liked it when I visited it, but
I've
it's
never
not like
been
a
there.
it's not a lovely European city. It's still Manchester in the north of England.
But
So
Manchester
we're not talking
United,
about.
Built
Yeah, I know, and
built up
that's the
prestige.
only
Yeah.
reason I would. That's the only reason I would put. I know Manchester's a bigger city as well than Newcastle, but that's the only reason. The fact that United were already there is maybe the only reason why you would say that it's a more desirable destination. Because all in all, the rest is pretty similar, and even the playing experience. You've got a crazed city like Newcastle behind you. I think if that's what attracts you, rather than maybe the warmer weather where you'd be looking at a Spain or an Italy, if that's what attracts you, and playing in front of fans like that and a stadium like that, I mean, Newcastle can be every bit as attractive as Man City was back in the early days. So I guess it's a little bit anticlimactic. I wasn't expecting them to go out and sign Mbappe or anything like this, but I was expecting them to at least try to make. Because remember, in that early City, they bought Robinho, which was the statement strike signing, and he's a name. And I was sort of expecting them to sign maybe one name, and then continue with the plan of sort of decimating the competition around them and getting the best players from there. But to this point, all I found on the transfer list that I went on was they got Nick Pope, I think, on a free, which I think is a good signing. I like Nick Pope as a goalkeeper.
Mate, how are you forgetting the marquee signing, Sven Botman, from Lille to Newcastle for 37 mil? I've actually never heard of him.
I haven't seen him play. I've heard good things
And
though,
I've
but
never seen him play. But
yeah.
37 mil for a centre back. Now I just want to see if they've signed anyone else. Nick Pope, yep. Matt Targett has come in from Aston Villa.
He was on loan there late
Was he?
last season. I think he was.
I don't know.
But like
It says that he joined apparently.
I'm looking at the list as well, and I'm seeing like a player like Calvin Bassey go from Rangers to Ajax, which I think is a good move for him. But could Newcastle have not looked at getting a centre back like that? Could they not have looked at? I'm even looking at an Axel Witsel go from Dortmund to Atletico. Maybe they could have looked to get an experienced player like that in to help with the younger players who haven't qualified for the Champions League yet. I just expected a little bit more, but obviously they've signed Botman for a big fee, and I've heard good things. I haven't seen him play, so I'll be interested to see him play in the Premier League this upcoming season, and interested to see if they do anything in the next month or so. I don't know
Well,
if you had any other. Yeah, go
well,
on.
why haven't they gone for Tillemans, for instance? Because Tillemans apparently
Yeah,
wants to
that
leave,
too.
but Tillemans has apparently stated that he wants to go to Arsenal.
Yeah,
Like,
that's fair.
apparently that's like public knowledge that he wants to go to Arsenal. So, but yeah, like they could have tried to come in and swoop that one up. They could have gone in for Rafinha as well. Like they have the funds for it. Like who knows whether Rafinha wanted to go, but they could have at least made an attempt to try and sway him.
Even a Diego Carlos who went from Sevilla to Aston Villa, another centre back who they could have looked at. So I don't know. Just been disappointed that they haven't at least been making splashes. Like maybe they can at least go for these players and not land them, but I don't know. They haven't up till this point. They
Yeah,
haven't
like
really done anything.
I haven't even heard rumors that they're going for
Yeah,
anyone either.
exactly. I don't know if you had anything else from the Premier League, and then I think that's all I had in terms of looking at the landscape.
Nah, not really. Like we've covered at least the Premier League and a little bit of La Liga. I haven't really been following what's happening in Italy or Germany to be honest. Or even
Well, to be fair, Italy's been quite quiet. Obviously, we've got Lukaku going back to Inter, and we've got Pogba going back to Juventus.
yeah,
Apart from that, nothing really piqued my
Dybala to
interest.
Roma, I think as well.
Oh, and
That's
Dybala, he
confirmed?
was the other one. Who,
Yeah.
in fact, the whole Roma project is somewhat piquing my interest with Mourinho there, Tammy Abraham as well. So with the open nature of Serie A, they'll be interested to see if that moves the needle at all. If he can get Dybala playing anywhere near his best again. Also, the Pogba and Lukaku signings will be interesting because obviously neither Inter or Juventus or Roma were champions last season. They're trying to take the crown off AC Milan. So I think in terms of the openness of that race, that could be interesting to watch. But I think it's pretty clear that by the way that we're talking that Spain and England look like they're shaping up to be the talent pools of Europe. As well as, and I don't know if you've been following any, but the Bayern signings have somewhat got me a little bit interested as well. In terms of you've got Mane, I touched on De Ligt earlier, going over as probably their marquee signing, and then you've got Gravenberg from Ajax, less than 20 mil. I've seen limited amounts of him, but all accounts are he's a very highly touted youngster. So and obviously they get rid of Lewandowski. So maybe a different direction for Nagelsmann and Bayern. Obviously, Muller's still a main part of that. Neuer's still a main part. So how different will it be? We don't know, but it's good for Bayern. I think they've done good business. But in terms of the Bundesliga, I mean, who else is going to challenge them in the Bundesliga? I don't see anyone challenging them.
Yeah, no one really. I can't. Yeah, you can pretty much, chuck your mortgage on them winning the the Bundesliga.
I know. Yeah, I mean, Leipzig have a few good players, but they can't sustain it. That's
Yeah.
just, yeah.
But
I think,
also PSG haven't been doing anything really, have they?
yeah, that's another club as well that I have no idea what the direction is.
Yeah.
They don't really need to do anything because they have a really good squad, and if that front three can fire together, then they've got to be a threat for even the Champions League. They've got to be a threat for every competition. But the fact that they've got a sort of somewhat unknown manager in during the summer, and obviously the big thing for them was keeping Mbappe, which we knew about towards the end of last season. But what's the direction there? Because I think they're trying to focus a lot on youth, and maybe the new management appointment sort of emphasizes that. But they've still got this world class squad that, if they click, they can challenge for everything. So I don't get the direction there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, like they have a bunch of players that have come back from loan, but nothing really exciting. They only signed two players with Vitinha and Nuno Mendes. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think Nuno Mendes might have already been there as well. It might have just been a completed loan deal or whatever. So
Not sure. It
yeah,
says that it's a 38 million dollar euro fee. So yeah, who knows how they'll go. Oh, hang on,
well, I
we've
think
got about Di Maria to Juventus as well.
yeah, but Di Maria's been finished as a top European footballer for about 2 seasons
Yeah,
now. So
he's already 34, so he's pushing it. But still,
yeah,
it's
he is.
for a free signing. It's not too bad. Like maybe they'll
No, it's not
be
too
able to
bad. I'm more
push.
interested to see if Pogba can get back to anywhere near world class at Juve.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Let's see how that all runs. We've still got a
Yeah,
month left
and
of the window.
exactly. I think we'll have more transfers to report on. But it does look like we touched on earlier that most of the biggest clubs in Europe have done most of their business. I can't really see Real Madrid making a big splash. I can't see Barcelona making any more big splashes because they've made so many already. And Liverpool and City look pretty set. And I think at this stage, along with Bayern, uh, they look like the top teams. They look like the teams that we'll be watching intently to start with. But like with any season, we're going to have so many storylines unfold during the season. We're going to have disappointing teams. We're going to have teams that play above their expectations. So fascinated to see what happens. But I think in terms of what we've seen so far, I don't have anything more to add. I don't think you do you?
No, like I was gonna ask, like, do you want to hold your predictions for like league winners and Champions League winners and Europa League winners maybe till the window is wrapped up, or do you want to give an early, like a nice little tantalizing early prediction of how you think they will
Look
unfold?
on Look, honestly, any prediction I make right now would be written in the lightest grey lead pencil with the biggest eraser, just sitting right next to it, ready to rub it out after I've seen any portion of the games. Because making predictions without seeing the games is just foolishness. But I guess if you got to really press me for predictions, I go City for the Premier League. I'll stick with Real Madrid for La Liga. Uh, Bayern obviously for the Bundesliga. Italy's really open. I'll go Inter for Serie A. Obviously PSG for Liga and Champions League, which is the big unknown. Hmm. I'll go Bayern for the Champions League.
Really, Bayern? Huh? It's a bit of a surprise one. What about Europa League? Because that is automatic
I
qualification into the Champions League.
I barely know who's qualified for the Europa League. I'll be honest.
I reckon Arsenal are gonna go deep in that competition and potentially win it because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know
right.
they're in it. So I think they're in terms of squad, at least preseason in terms of squad performance, and I guess you can say even depth. Like they've increased the depth a little bit. I can see them getting to the semi-finals at a minimum. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I'll definitely go with that because they're and they should be aiming for that because if they want to start to get those European reps as this new incarnation of themselves of Arsenal, then you like as much as in England they look down upon the Europa League, especially if you're a club of Arsenal size. I think they really should be using it as a valuable tool to start getting because the deeper you go in the Europa League, the bigger those games get. So you start getting that experience.
Yeah, and it's also another
Um,
trophy as well.
yeah, exactly, and it's another way into the Champions League.
Yeah.
So for all those reasons, you got to treat it seriously.
Yeah.
Are you going to give us your predictions then?
City for England, Real for Spain, Bayern for Germany, PSG. These are the obvious ones. At least these ones are the obvious ones. PSG for France. I reckon Juve will take Serie A. Just because Allegri's had another season with that squad and they strengthened a little bit, even though they did lose De Ligt. And I reckon Arsenal will win the Europa League, and I reckon City are gonna finally get the Champions League.
I wanted to say City, but it was too easy.
Yeah,
So I threw out Bayern.
but even so, like I think that they're probably the favourites, and I think deservedly so, especially after the signings that they've made. I know that I reckon overall they possibly have even slightly weakened the squad by selling Jesus, Sterling, and Zinchenko. Like they've slightly weakened it because I guess they've replaced Jesus. Haaland was more of a replacement for Aguero, but a year too late. So Alvarez is probably a replacement for Sterling because I think he's a winger. No, because he's a winger. Jesus they haven't really replaced because he's more of a central. I think he's more central striker than a winger, but he can play on the wing. So they haven't really replaced him. Zinchenko, if they can sign Cucurella, then that's a really good replacement. But yeah, they haven't addressed the Jesus, but I think they've addressed Sterling at least for the future. So,
and to be fair, they probably don't need to fully address Jesus because I think they have a lot of good attacking players, but they need to address the left back position. Because
100%.
if anything happens to Cancelo, or like we spoke about late last season, Walker, or if you want to start using Cancelo in midfield or at right back, they need another left back, and they've let Zinchenko go. And Cucurella would be really good, but he'd be very similar to Zinchenko. I don't know if it would have even been worth going through all the hassle, even though I really like Mark Cucurella as a player.
I think he's more of an out and out left back, isn't he? Because Zinchenko's more of a he can drift into the middle.
I know Zinchenko's a number 10. His development is of a number 10. I'm pretty sure a central midfielder. But Cucurella started as a winger, so he's still not an out-and-out left-back either.
Yeah, but he likes to have that touchline and provide width, whereas Zinchenko doesn't. That's not really his habit.
Probably more of a wing-back, Cucurella is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's for years now a position where if I was a City supporter and I wanted them to get stronger, that's the position I'd want them to get. And the one who made my first team, Theo Hernandez, not even any waves. I think if City went into a summer and added Haaland up front and the world-class left back that is Theo Hernandez at left back, they would be unstoppable. They already nearly are, but my goodness, that would be scary. So to not even see anything happen on that front from a team like City who have infinite amounts of money, maybe we're starting to see the effects of the pandemic with Newcastle and City not spending exorbitant amounts of money this window. But that's just one that pops straight to my head that would take... It's hard to take City to the next level, but I don't know. I don't know if anyone beats them. They might go unbeaten the whole season if they get players like that.
Yeah, but the only problem with the Hernandez one is that Cancelo has already cemented himself as a left back, so Hernandez is a backup.
Well, Cancelo I think they used him in the friendly at right back, Cancelo, and Cancelo always started as a right back. He's a right footer, and like we said, the central midfield thing can remain an option for him as well. So he's such a good footballer that he could play anywhere. He really is. But yeah, I think that's a good place to leave tonight. We've pretty much touched on everything that we could have that we've seen over. Well, we've started ramping our interest back up in the last week. So, Nev, until we do this again, which I'm sure will be very soon, it's been a pleasure, and I'll talk to you again soon on the pod.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's good to catch up again, and we'll revisit our predictions at the end of the window because I think there'll be 3 or 4 games of the league that have been done, and obviously more signings. So yeah, penciled in for now, but we'll pen it in at the end of the window.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you real soon.